evening. I would like to call to order the August 3rd, 2026 Lake Washington School Board meeting. Let the record reflect that all board members are present. The board values public participation and engagement in the meetings of the board. Board meetings will continue to be live streamed on the LWSD website and are available for viewing following the conclusion of the board meeting as well. The public are always welcome to email the board at boardmembers@lwsd.org. Director Liberty, would you like to read our land acknowledgement tonight?
Yes, thank you. The Board of Directors of Lake Washington School District acknowledges that our district is on the indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples, who have reserved treaty rights on this land, including the Duwamish and the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived here since time immemorial. We commit to continue collaborating with our Native community to teach the indigenous history of this land and these local tribes to all children of the district. We also commit to provide the best possible education for all children of Native descent who attend our schools.
Thank you. I will now entertain a motion to approve the August 3rd, 2026 agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director LaLiberty and seconded by Director Yoakum to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. The next item on the agenda will be public comment. The Board of Directors of Lake Washington School District welcomes the public to the business meetings of the board and encourages community engagement. The board dedicates 30 minutes to hear from the public during the public comment portion of the meeting, with each individual provided up to 2 minutes to speak. Participants should not expect a response from the board at the end of their comments, as we dedicate this time to listening to your voice and would like to get as many members of the public an opportunity to speak as our time allows. If you have materials you would like distributed to the board, please leave them in the basket next to the podium. Each speaker will be called to the podium in the order of sign up. A timer will appear on the screen showing your remaining time. When you have 30 seconds left, the timer will turn yellow to let you know you're nearing the end. When 10 seconds remain, the timer will turn red as a signal to wrap up your remarks. Please note that the microphone will be turned off shortly after your time expires, so we ask all speakers to conclude when their time is complete. I'd like to also remind everyone here this evening that this opportunity to engage in dialogue is also an opportunity to model respectful discourse to our students and our community. We ask that the audience refrain from commenting and from prolonged applause following each comment, as it takes up time and prevents us from listening to as many speakers as we can fit into our dedicated 30 minutes. Once the public comment portion of the business meeting is over, we ask that everyone who is not interested in listening to the rest of the agenda please exit quietly and in an orderly fashion so that we can continue the rest of our meeting. Members of the public can sign up to participate on the district website. Sign up closes at noon on the day of the board meeting, and comments will be offered in the order of sign up. Speakers can designate another person to speak in their place in advance of the noon deadline, but speaker substitutions at the meeting unfortunately cannot be accommodated. As a reminder, the board does not discuss personnel matters at meetings. Members of the community are encouraged to attempt to resolve issues with teachers, school principals, or other district personnel before bringing issues to the board. Additionally, speakers should refrain from naming students unless they are the parent or guardian of said student. Public comment will now begin at 7:04 p.m. Our first speaker is Jeannette Siemers.
Good evening. My name is Jeannette Siemers. I am a former Lake Washington School District educator, a local high school assistant principal and principal of 11 years, and a Lake Washington School District parent since 2011. Both of my children attended Juanita High School, my son graduating in 2024 and my daughter entering her senior year. Both had Jeffrey Erickson as their kindergarten teacher and will tell you he is their favorite and remains an integral part of their lives today. This past school year, I volunteered in the Frost second grade pod for 3 to 6 hours every week, logging over 125 hours. As an experienced public school administrator, I know what appropriate high quality instruction looks like, and I know what appropriate relationships with students look like, sound like, and feel like. Not once during those 125 hours did I ever question Mr. Erickson's intentions or actions, nor did I ever view them as inappropriate or overly affectionate. I have lived in the tightly knit Kingsgate neighborhood for the past 15 years. Recently, multiple families have reached out to me, sharing their deep frustration caused by a severe lack of communication from building and district leadership, a systemic lack of teacher support, and perceived retaliatory behavior against their children. It has been devastating to watch this community fracture. There's a glaring, unacceptable double standard in how concerns are handled depending on your position. Tonight, I urge this board to stop looking away and take action. Examine the toxic culture and climate actively growing at Robert Frost Elementary. Safeguard dedicated, irreplaceable educators from unfounded scrutiny and administrative overreach, and bring back the transparency, trust, and support that our students, teachers, and families urgently deserve. You were each elected to be the voice of our communities. Will you please listen closely to the voices of the families who have courageously shared and continue to share on behalf of the Robert Frost community? Thank you.
The next speaker is Siddhi Murkuri.
Good evening. My name is Siddhi Murkuri, and I'm a rising sophomore at Eastlake High School. I'm here on behalf of a youth-led initiative called Unmuted. We're focused on bringing awareness about sexual assault. The LWSD Policies and Procedures page, Section 300 of Code 3205, states that Lake Washington School District is committed to a positive and productive education free from discrimination, including sexual harassment, which can occur from an adult to student to student, or can be carried out by a group of students or adults. I'm here because I refuse to believe that student safety begins and ends with the policy posted on a website. The 2023 Crime in Washington report states that schools are the third most likely prevalent location for sexual assault to occur in the state. Moreover, students in LWSD are no strangers to this issue. In the past 2 years alone, in a case that is currently the subject of ongoing litigation, this district has faced allegations of failing to protect an elementary school student from sexual abuse, as well as the arrest of a Redmond High School counselor accused of an inappropriate relationship with the student, and these examples only skim the surface. This district's responsibility extends past responding after harm has occurred. It includes preventing in the first place, and the biggest gap is awareness. Most students are not cognizant of the protections within this district, and even the strongest policies are ineffective if the people who are there meant to protect are unaware of them. Policy 3205 is a promise to all students in this district that they will be protected. However, it still exists, only on a website rather than in classrooms. Thank you.
This concludes public comment. Thank you to those who participated and attended to engage with the board. As we move forward with the meeting, if you decide to remain at our meeting, we ask that all attendees are respectful and honor standard meeting protocols. Keeping side conversations to a minimum and voices at the lowest level possible is expected of all attendees. If you decide to leave at this time, please do so in an orderly and quiet manner so the board can continue their business meeting. Again, thank you for coming and participating in the meeting this evening. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the August 3rd, 2026 consent agenda. I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move approval.
Seconded.
It has been moved by Director LaLiberty and seconded by Director Meekhoff. Superintendent Holman, will you please poll the board?
Yes, I will. Director Meekhoff,
Yes.
Vice President Yoakum,
Yes.
Director Richter,
Yes.
Director LaLiberty,
Yes.
and President Guthrie.
Yes, motion carries. Superintendent Holman, will you please review the donations?
I will. Tonight in the board's packet, there's over $89,000 in donations, and we just want to thank the Muir PTSA, Rockwell PTSA, Wilder PTSA, Evergreen Middle School PTSA, Finn Hill Middle School Booster Club, Juanita High School Booster Club, Lake Washington High School PTSA, and the Lake Washington Schools Foundation for your generous donations for a variety of activities. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Dr. Holman, do you or staff have a legislative update?
I just have a couple of quick things. As you know, we meet with our local delegation pre and post session, and we're just wrapping up our post session meetings. We had to reschedule with Senator Slatter. We just met with her July 23rd, had a great conversation. She's always highly engaged and wanting to do right by her constituents, and so really appreciate that conversation. We've scheduled to meet with Representative Santos, who I believe is the chair of the Education Committee, and so she doesn't technically represent Lake Washington School District, but it's someone who is of extreme importance, and so we're meeting with her on September 10th to have that conversation. Additionally, I wanted to share that the Washington Association of School Administrators has released their legislative platform, and so highlighted in their platform is the big three funding obligations. They've identified materials, supplies, and operating costs, special education, and substitute costs as the three areas of advocacy related to funding. And there was some legislative, maybe it was in the email that they sent, some policy advocacy that they're also putting forward. Number one, reforming tort and liability laws that drive escalating insurance costs is the first item. Protecting taxpayers from abuse of public records requests that consume staff time and taxpayer funding. Fully funding, revising, or eliminating unfunded mandates on school districts. And maintaining investments in transition to kindergarten and local effort assistance, LEA, to support educational opportunities and funding equity. And so as our state agencies adopt their platforms, I'll bring those forward and just share those with the board.
All right, the first item on the agenda is a communications update. Dr. Holman.
So I guess once a decade, we provide the board with an update from the communications department. That's the pattern that we have at this point. It's so interesting because the board is, and rightfully so, has had commentary, interest, and a desire for a strong communications program in the district because of what that means to our community, our staff, our students. And yet we don't often hear from our communications department. And so in our planning for the board's work plan, we identified a communications update would be great. And so our executive director of communications, Shannon Parthimer, is here tonight to share about her department, and she has some pretty remarkable statistics that she's going to share with the board. And I think we may want to revise our pattern of once a decade updates to the board from the communications team, and maybe do that a little more often. But Shannon, thank you.
Thank you. I'm excited to share a little bit more about my team and some of the important statistics that we have around our department and the work that we do. Our mission is to build public understanding, trust, and support for Lake Washington School District. That being said, we have 10 members of our communications team. I'm the executive director. We have Colin Sullivan, who's our associate director, John Knorr, our video multimedia specialist, who's back there helping operate the school board video for the evening, Stephanie Kura, who's our web specialist, Chelsea Lee, our graphic artist, and I would say those 5 are really a part of our communications team overall. Then we have a volunteer team that includes Chris Robeson, our volunteer program coordinator, and Victoria Getzi Nelson, who runs our Links program, which is a community mentoring program for elementary age kids that has lunch buddies. So they match up a community member with a student, and they get to have lunch together once a week. Then we have our, we call them our family support team, or our family welcome team. That includes Lori Sperry, our administrative professional 3, Tarika Santiago, admin professional 2, and then our newest team member, Carolina Lee, who's also our administrative professional 2. Those 3 sit down here at our front desk, so anytime that you've walked in or out of the resource center, that is who you've spoken with. You could also, if you call the district office, that's who you speak with on the phone. So going into our work, I've split it into those 3 teams, kind of within our overarching team. We have communications, who do media relations, regular communications like newsletters. We manage our district website and help manage the school websites as well. Our staff portal, school home communications, and that's primarily done through Parent Square. So we have a lot of work that we do with our teams, our schools, to make sure that the messaging that's coming from Parent Square is either the district's messaging or the school's messaging, and that's our primary communications tool there. We have crisis communications, branding, reputation management, social media, staff recognition, community events, such as like Touch a Truck events that our 3 cities put on. And then all of our videography and storytelling is done by that part of our department. Under our volunteer team, they manage our volunteer program. We have over 16,000, almost 17,000 volunteers in our school district. We have our Links mentoring program that I mentioned before. They also manage our Peach Jar e-flyer system. So that's any community group that's a nonprofit that wants to put out a flyer can do so through Peach Jar e-flyers. So can our PTSAs, booster clubs, and our schools. And those go out to all of our families. And it's in lieu of having paper go home with students, we now have an online system for that. And then we also place students who are trying to become counselors in college. They come and do practicums within our school system, so Chris helps to place those individuals in our schools. Family welcome team, we have we call it our welcome desk. They do visitor management, they manage the building use for the resource center, variances, choice transfers. We have on our website a contact us button, and that has lots of emails, as you'll see later, that come in, and they manage those emails or get them to the right department to help answer questions. And then they're just our primary customer service. They're the first people that you meet when you walk into the building or call here at the Resource Center. So they're really all about customer service and making sure that they're a friendly, welcoming face. So for key performance indicators for communications department, I just want to share some statistics. We have over 21,000 Facebook followers, which is an increase. It continues to increase. 6,287 Instagram followers, 5,624 X followers, which is actually a decrease. It's been decreasing over the last several years, which is a national trend. And we also talked about earlier today, it's also there's not as many bots on Twitter, so that also could be part of the reason why we're seeing that decrease there. 7,922 followers on LinkedIn and 3,133 followers on YouTube. For Parent Square data, we have 40,798 family members in our system, 5,419 staff members, and then 3,409 guests in our system. So those are folks who have gone to our district website and signed up to receive newsletters, whether it's our Connections e-newsletter that goes to all of our families, or it could be specific to like a construction project update for Rockwell Elementary that they want to know about. So they can sign up to receive any of our communications that way. For our website, over the last school year, we've had 6.5 million views, 880,000 visitors, 21.4 million file downloads. So that means anybody that downloads like a copy of our calendar or any document that is a PDF on our website, that's how many downloads we've had as a district. And then 51,000 Weglot translation requests, and that's the tool that sits on our website and allows the website to be translated into other languages. So that's how many times that's been requested. On YouTube, we've had 162,000 views, 221 new subscribers this year. And our top video, which is what's on the February 10th ballot for Lake Washington, has over 80,000 views. And that partially is because that was pushed out to a larger community than just our followers. But it also is interesting to note that the next largest video downloads is our graduation live streams, which had anywhere from 2,100 to 3,700 views. So it's interesting data. Moving on to volunteers. As of a few weeks ago, we had 16,971 approved volunteers in the district. We've placed 122 counselors in practicums, and we've saved over 13,750 trees by using the Peach Jar e-flyer system. Our Links mentoring program has 229 students enrolled, 228 mentors that are trained or have returned to the program, 221 students matched, so we do have a few students still waiting to be matched, 3,351 hours shared, 3,502 visits with students, 15 elementary schools are currently served with that program, and 11 schools are currently on a wait list. And the reason for that is just the staff time to manage the program. We just don't have the funding for, so 15 schools is about the max that we can handle at a time. And then a couple things for our family welcome team. They have responded to 2,119 messages since August 1st of 2025. And then they processed 1,087 choice transfers between February 1st and May 4th for the 26-27 school year. So for the upcoming school year, because choice, that's the open enrollment period, starts February 1st. So when we think about communicating within our school district, we have a paradigm that we use, and this relates to crisis communications or any kind of communications that we do. We really value transparency and will share the information that students, families, and staff need. We appreciate timeliness and will share information in a time frame that allows people to be able to act upon the information that we're sharing. We focus on the positive but don't neglect the negative when necessary. We fact check and send out information that is known to be true. We attend to and correct bias in our language that would reinforce racist, sexist, or ableist practices. We try to communicate essential information as distinctly as possible so that it is accessible to the greatest audience and can be easily translated. And then we recognize that there may be times when something cannot or should not be disclosed, and in those instances have a responsibility to be able to identify the rationale for non-disclosure. So there are times where we just know we can't share information, whether it's privacy or privacy of staff members involved, that we just can't share information publicly. And we try to share why we can't share that information. So given that, I wanted to share that a lot of the work we do ties into all of our operational expectations, but these are the 4 that I'm going to highlight: OE3, OE8, OE10, and OE14. So talking about OE3, we talk about building relationships among families and between families and educators through opportunities to interact in meaningful ways. One of the things that we do as a department is help our PTSA to organize the New and International Family Welcome event every year, which is held in this room and several other rooms here at the Resource Center. And everyone is invited to attend that event, and we usually have a pretty good turnout at that event, and it's also an opportunity for families to meet each other. So if they've moved here from out of state or out of country, they get a chance to engage with others that are in a similar situation and get all their questions answered by district leadership. We also have our No to See Us group. It's a partnership that came out of COVID, and it was part of the Eastside Pathways program. And what they do is they create videos every week in Spanish, and they transcreate the information. So I send them information about what's happening in the district, and they not only translate it, but they transcreate it. So they take that information in, ask me questions or follow-up information, get additional resources, and then they create a video that explains that to families in a way that makes sense to somebody that might not be from this country, might be new to the US school system. And so those videos go out every week, but in addition to that, we also bring in focus groups of people that follow that group and listen to those videos and teach them information, but also get information from them about what other information do they need from us and what would be helpful in these videos moving forward. And they also, create some special videos throughout the school year on different topics like attendance or special education services, so that those are the topics that we've heard from these groups are important to them. So it's a good opportunity to bring people from the same culture together to have conversation about schools. Going to the next one, 3.4, we work to ensure that families have the information and resources that they need to support their children's learning. So we have a lot of ways of communicating across the school system. As I mentioned before, we have our website that goes to everyone. We have Parent Square that goes to all of our families. We have newsletters, and in addition to district newsletters, we also have a means to share information. We know that families tend to review the stuff from their teacher first, their child's teacher first, their school second, and then the district is kind of the third option for looking at information. So we have ways of getting mass information that we need every parent to know to our schools so that they can include it in their newsletters. And so that's another important part of our process as well. Social media, we have, as I mentioned, we have all those different resources for sharing stories on social media. Flash Alert is also a tool that we use to alert people when school closures happen, and that is the first place that information gets posted because that goes to news media immediately as well, and families can sign up to receive the alert that way, and they'll get it right away instead of having to wait, the 10 minutes or so that it takes to get the next set of messaging out. And then one-on-one communications, whether it's the front desk taking the calls and asking questions or providing to our department leadership, we're getting a lot of questions about choice schools. Can we help get that information more prevalent on the website? So just having a lot of one-on-one communication with families and understanding what they need as a system. So that's another way that we work to communicate and support children's learning. For 3.6, ensure stakeholders have a voice in decision-making and the factors which influence them are transparent. We use a tool called Thought Exchange to try to gather feedback from our families on different topics. Most recently, we've used it for like budget, and then we've also used it for like sustainability. Sustainability team has used it with their advisory committee to gather feedback as well. We do community polling on a regular basis to find out how we're meeting community needs and what resources or tools the community needs the most from us, and where they're getting information from the district and all of those types of pieces of information. And then media tracking as well, so we monitor all media about the school district and find out what's happening in the larger system as well, not just Lake Washington, but what's happening around us that we need to be aware of, and what topics might be of importance coming up. For 3.8, ensure that enrollment processes, including registration, school assignment, and program choice, are clear, welcoming, and barrier-free. So we've tried to make the website for registration as easy as possible to find. Our front desk is able to answer all of those calls. Our family welcome team can answer all those calls and answer questions about how to register for school. We do flyers and posters around the community to try, and yard signs. You've probably seen the yard signs up as well, to try to ensure that people know when to register. Social media posts, and then those in-person events that I mentioned before, like the Touch a Truck events that we do at the schools or out in the different cities. It's really interesting when we go to those events. A lot of the kids that are there are young, like 3 or 4, and so we get a lot of questions about preschool or when can I register for kindergarten. So it's a lot of those in-person, able to ask the question and answer their question about how to register. And it's really fun, especially when you're in Sammamish. A lot of the kids won't be in our school, but they'll be at Issaquah school too. So it's also helping out our neighbors with what their registration process looks like as well. And then assuring that no volunteer has contact with students without first clearing reasonable background inquiries and checks. So as I mentioned, we have 16,971 approved volunteers. And that means we processed 8,337 volunteer applications between August 1st and June 30th. And I say we, that's Chris, processing all those applications. And every single application goes through the Washington State Patrol background check process and is reviewed thoroughly before they are approved in our system. For OE8, communication with and counsel to the board. 8.5 is inform the board of anticipated significant media coverage. So we do press releases, make sure the board's aware of the press releases that are going out, and then also share articles with you, or any, like if we've been interviewed on a topic or reached out to by a reporter, we share that with the board to make sure you're aware of it before it happens. And then OE10, learning environment treatment of students, ensuring that learning environments are supported by comprehensive safety systems that promote physical and emotional safety and include coordinated practices for prevention, early identification and intervention, threat assessment, crisis response, and recovery, so that students and staff are secure and supported in the learning environment. Communications is a central part of the safety advisory team. We're on all the committees. It's a great opportunity for us to have conversations with our local police agencies, fire departments, and just make those, have those conversations before anything happens and really know each other. It's a great opportunity for us to work with those teams. And then we also do tabletop exercises, and it's a good opportunity for us to think on our feet and really work through our crisis communications responses, which we have prepared and ready in case there is a crisis that comes up. And then we do the Raptor alerts. We're all part of the Raptor alert team, and we get alerted whenever there's an issue. We make sure our front desk is included in that, and they know what's going on in the school as well. They get talking points for callers that call in. And then we jump on the calls immediately and try to work through the communications as we have information to share with our community. OE14, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but incorporating diverse perspectives and culturally relevant strategies in district and school communications and community engagement. So I mentioned Note to CS already. That's one way that we engage with our community. We have the Weglot translation tool on our website as well. We work very closely with our language access team. Actually, cubicle space is really close together, and we make sure that we help them and support them in any messaging that's going out to the community, posters, flyers, things that they're putting up. I saw some of you have the sticker for their department. That's been designed by our team. We make sure that we're helping them in any way we can to communicate that these tools and resources are available to our families. And then accessibility is another big thing. We do a lot of training around accessibility for our web specialists, or our web editors at each of our schools. And then we're continuing that process. There's some deadlines coming up next April that we are aware of and we're working through right now. So just making sure that things are easy to read and easy to find on our website is really important. And then I just want to give some accolades to my team. We won the Washington School Public Relations Association Communications Awards in 2025. Our website was given an award of excellence. We got an honorable mention for video storytelling, and for an informational video, we got an award of merit. And then we just found out a couple weeks ago that we got a National School Public Relations Association Publication and Digital Media Award for one of our videos called The Power of Inclusion, and it was an award of excellence. So our team gets recognized quite frequently. Our website won not only that award, but Final Site featured us on their blog when we first launched, and then they also won a Muse Award for our website design a few years ago. So it's just really a great time to just recognize my team and make sure that you're aware of all the things that they have achieved. And with that, does anyone have any questions about my team or our work?
Director Meekhoff.
Something that we had talked a little bit about before, so if this has changed, let me know, is we had connected around the board summaries and making those more accessible to people, because I'm thinking specifically of Lake Washington Schools Foundation, but people who maybe live in the district or work within it or are involved but are not parents or caregivers, so they don't have that parent square. And I know that they can start an account, but in terms of like reducing barriers to accessing, because the summaries are really, really good. It's such a great recap. And I often rely on those in the Lake Washington Schools Foundation meetings. And it would just be great to be able to send that out to wider groups so that they do know what's happening.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, people can sign up to receive those if they're interested. There's a sign up feature on our website for that. The other thing is we do post them, in, I believe, on Diligent Community as well. So they are accessible there as well for people. So we'll make sure we get you those links so you know where they're at.
Thank you. I didn't realize that they were on Diligent. When I was poking around, I didn't see it.
Yep.
I mentioned earlier that I was working on a project outside of board work that where I was working with a city, city government on, this was AI use cases, but one of the interviews that we did to uncover use cases was actually with the communication director. And one of her frustrations that we uncovered was she said, sometimes another department is putting on some event and they don't tell me, and I don't find out about it at all, or I find out about it through some roundabout way, and once I find out, then I can highlight it and the great work that's going on. But that connection from the work that's happening day to day with the community to the communications department, who can highlight that and sort of tell the story of the city, that link is a challenge. Would you say that that's a challenge here? What are some ways that all of us outside of communications can help with that if that is a challenge?
Yeah, thank you. That actually is a huge challenge, having 55 schools and over 5,000 staff members that are doing amazing things with kids every day. It is challenging to find those stories and to be able to share them publicly. We have what we call the School News Reporters Program. So we've identified a staff member at each school who is our key communicator at that school, and we send them regular communications like, hey, Veterans Day is coming up. Are you doing an assembly or some other event that we can cover? And then we try to make sure that we spread that around so that we're not covering the same 5 schools throughout the school year. We really try to track it and make sure that we're covering every school in some way throughout the school year. We also, in addition to that, we have a form on our website where anyone can submit news ideas to us, and then we just have a process that we use to determine if it's a newsworthy story or not. And that's not to say that not every award is amazing, But a lot of things happen with our students outside of school that's not really connected to the work that we do as a school system. And so if we shared every single one of those awards, that would be a full-time, more than a full-time job for somebody to do. And I always liken it to, yes, a student might have won an academic award, but it's not really school-related. That's about the same as a student going out and playing a sport with a team that's not connected to the school and us sharing that information as well. So we have to be really careful of making sure that the news that we're covering is school-related. And then we have other ways of sharing information. If somebody else publishes an article about one of our students that's amazing, we can just share it, whatever was published before. So I would say we are not short on stories, but at the same time, it can be a challenge to make sure we're covering the right things, and we are hearing about things. So if you ever hear about something that you think we should cover, we'd love to hear it. And that goes to our community too. We always are looking for news stories, and we have that submission form on our website where anyone could submit an idea.
Director Yoakum.
First, thank you so much for taking the time to put this together and share this information. It sounds like kind of from the response to President Guthrie's question, and I think also in some of the discussion, or something you talked about during the thought exchange, that gathering information, it kind of sounds like it more relies on community to reach out or sort of take that initiative and first step to share ideas for a story or participate in the thought exchange. Like, does your team work at, I guess, finding ways to actively gather information, and kind of, are we reaching a diverse population, and are we hearing from the voices that are not represented, or are we just waiting for those to come to us? I'm just kind of curious on, what do you do about the information that comes to you, or gathering of information? I think, and I don't even know if that's part of what you do. I see like the one-on-one, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that's something we struggle with, and I think every school district across the country struggles with, because you do have definitely some audiences that are way more engaged with the school and are willing to do that reach out and share their opinion. But then when we put out a thought exchange, we do always have that concern of, like, if a family's not technologically savvy on using the tool, how do we make sure that they are also getting their input into this process? And I think that's like with our Note to CS group, that's when we hear from focus groups and going into the spaces that they're in instead of trying to pull them into our spaces is really important. And that group pushes us a lot on that. A good example is our back to school jam that we offer, or any back to school resources. We share a lot of information about how to give or how to donate to that, but not a lot of information is shared with a large audience about how to receive those resources if you need them. Because we do rely on families to go to their counselor and have that conversation. So that's something that we've continually talk about, is how do we engage those voices of people that aren't as actively engaged with our school community and bring them in to the conversation. So.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because I think all of us up here can say, even as a board, that's something we are really wanting to look at too, of how do we go and gather voices. So is it, you said with that group that like they've kind of pushed you, and and push is good. I think that's very good. So does that mean that, are you encouraging other groups to push you, or is it more that you are maybe actively going to seek out other groups to do something similar with, or kind of is there just more exploring or thought or like goals that you would have around that in future years? Just curious.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great idea to set some goals around that. We have worked exclusively with that group primarily at this point, but we'd love to hear from other groups as well that would like engagement with our team and with the school system in general. So I think that's a great goal for the future for us.
Any other questions? Thank you so much for presenting, and thank you to your team too for all the amazing work that you do.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the public hearing on the adoption of the 2026-27 budget. Dr. Holman.
Yes, and so tonight the board will hear, hold a public hearing. I did want to provide one update. I provided it to you in writing, but just want to make sure I point out that the budgets that were presented on June 22nd have been modified, and it really was related to, we were still in the process of negotiating the contract related to, and I believe it was our math adoption. Yes. And we're allowed, for the digital portion of curriculum, we can use capital levy funds to pay for that, so out of our technology budget, but those funds have to be transferred to the general fund because you can't actually execute the payment from the technology capital levy budget. You have to transfer it to the general fund, so then you can make the curriculum payment. These are accounting rules that we live by. And so that adjustment has been made. And so you'll see that revenues and expenditures are slightly adjusted, but the bottom line of our budgets remains the same. And so that's the only change that the team has put forward at this point. And tonight you're having your public hearing.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? All right, at this time, I will open the public hearing for the adoption of the 2026-27 budget. State statutes require the board to hold a public hearing and adopt the budget by resolution. Is there anyone present who wishes to address the board on this topic this evening? If so, please come forward to the podium and provide your name and comments.
To speak on the budget tonight, but it turns out I do have some thoughts I'd like to share since I did come. I had hoped my son is here to speak, and you didn't let him speak. He's going to university, so he won't be able to come again, but if you'd like to budget a couple minutes for him, that would be nice. But on the topic of the budget, one thing that has occurred to me is that this district is spending a lot of money on legal fees. And I don't believe you have a specific line item for legal in the budget that you get to review. And a lot of those legal fees are to like combat parents that have, had things happen with their children or what have you. And I think it's not good for you as advocates for families and students to have that be so obscure. So what I'd like you to consider is asking Superintendent Holman to, a lot of times these fees are hidden in like general administration, to ferret out and give you actual data on how much money the district is spending on legal fees, largely used to kind of go against families and students, and consider what trends are being used and are they being monitored or just, used liberally. In the interest of a balanced budget, and I know that we're short on funds. So I guess that's my thoughts on the budget. I think you should have some more clarity and more transparency when it comes to legal expenses. And I would appreciate when we also talk about budgets, there was 20 minutes budgeted for public comment and only 4 of them were used, and we would have loved to have had 4 more minutes if you have it in your heart to indulge my son before he goes to university. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, seeing no further comment this evening, the public hearing is now closed. Please note the board is scheduled to take action at the August 17th board meeting to adopt resolution number 2447, adoption of the 2026-27 budget. All right, the board's going to take a 5-minute recess. We will resume at 7:50 p.m. The next item on the agenda is WSSDA legislative positions. Annually, school boards in Washington State go through a process to update positions of the Washington State School Directors Association. Through this process, boards have an opportunity to propose new positions and modify current positions, then vote on those proposals at the September General Assembly. Earlier this spring, the Lake Washington Board and others across the state proposed a whole lot of amendments. WSSDA shared all of the 2026 proposals for members to review in July. At this time, the board is able to propose amendments to those proposals, and those proposals only, for consideration by the WSSDA body. This is the only opportunity to amend the 2026 proposals before they are voted on at General Assembly. We've identified at least one item that we'd like to discuss, and that is, it's number 38. The current title is Education and Funding for Gifted Student Programs. Yes, it's being pulled up there. Yeah, and I can start speaking to this, and Director Richter, I know you have some thoughts as well. I proposed this amendment. There were a couple of concerns that I had about the proposal, looking at the original position as well as the proposed amendment. So first, the committee rationale and the proposal rationale made it very clear the intent of this, the revision, is to advocate for more for fully funding of highly capable services, which are defined as part of basic education. So they should be fully funded, just like the rest of basic education. And the proposal, though, did not, to me, it didn't read as full funding. It just read as funding for highly capable services. So making it really clear that the intent is to advocate for full funding. Also calling out identification, not just the education of highly capable students, knowing that having heard from our highly capable department before at many board meetings, identification is actually a huge part of the, or I won't say huge, but a significant part of the expenses that this district spends on highly capable services. It's really that identification process because it is so involved. And then the third thing is just, as long as we're updating this position, the gifted terminology that's in the position, that was in the original position as well as the proposed amendment, is not really the terminology that we use here in Lake Washington or really across Washington State. So updating gifted to highly capable. So that's what led me to put this forward. Director Richter, did you have any other comments?
I do not particularly have any other comments on the amendments to number 38. I thank you for laying it out precisely. The language on screen at the very bottom, if you look, is the new proposed language, just to be clear on that.
Any questions, comments? Yes, Director Yoakum.
I probably should know this, but if we go ahead and move forward with this, with the proposed draft, do we also need to have a rationale attached to it as well? And do we know what we want that to say?
That is a good question. And Director Richter is probably going to figure that out once that form is opened. We do have, the rationale are those 3 points that I said, which I have put in email as well. So we could copy paste that, I think. But yeah, that is the rationale. Did you have something, Director Richard? No? All right. So if we want to adopt this amendment as a board, we need to take action on that at this time. So I will now entertain a motion to approve and submit to WSSDA a proposed amendment to legislative position number 38, Education and Funding for Gifted Student Programs, to read as follows. First of all, updating the title to also reflect, so Education and Funding for Highly Capable Student Programs. And to read as follows: WSSDA shall initiate and or support legislation to ensure full, ample, and sustainable funding of highly capable services, including the identification process and the education of highly capable students identified by the district. So I will entertain a motion to adopt that.
So moved.
Seconded.
It has been moved by Director Richter and seconded by Director Meekhoff to approve and submit to WSSDA the proposed amendment to number 38 to read as I just said. Is there any further discussion? Director Yoakum.
I did just pull it up, and it does say, please provide your rationale for proposing this amendment. So I'm wondering if before voting, do we need to just agree to those points that we want to put in there? Because that's something that we have to attest that we have voted on that piece of it as well. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So let me pull up.
So part of
What I
our
wrote before.
voting is that we're also voting on the rationale behind the proposed draft.
So when I look at the form, it's the amendment. It says, which one are you amending? Write out the item as you'd like to see it amended. Please provide your rationale for proposing this amendment, and then confirmation. I affirm through a vote of the board, my board has taken action to approve the submission of this amendment. So I don't know if it's all of those components, but can you just restate the 3 reasons you said and just know that that's what it is and we put it in writing? Can you just say it one more time?
Yes, I'll read what I put in an email with the removal of some slightly snarky remarks. Both the proposer and committee rationales indicate that the intent is to fully fund high-cap programs, or I'd say highly capable programs. But the revised policy doesn't say anything about full funding. It just says, quote, ensure funding for the education of gifted students. Number 2, the majority of high-cap dollars today are spent on identification, not on the education of high-cap students. So having a position that solely refers to the education piece is not sufficient. Actually, maybe I would revise that to say many high-cap dollars rather than the majority, which may not be true across all districts. And number 3, gifted should be replaced with highly capable. All right. So all of that as part of the motion. Yes, Director Richter.
I am hoping that you can recap that for me later, because guess at what exact second my computer logged me out and declared I had to use my new passkey?
Well, I'm glad your new passkey is working. Any other discussion? Dr. Holman.
I just want to make sure the motion is clear. So the motion is to approve the amended language. The 3 items on your screen are the basis for the rationale, but you're also proposing to amend the title. And so all 3 of those are part of the what you're voting on.
Yes. So the revised title, revised the proposal text, or the proposed amendment, and the rationale. All right. Any other questions on what we're voting on? If not, we can vote. Okay. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. All right. Next on the agenda are the superintendent's interpretation and indicators of compliance for OE10, learning environment treatment of students. Dr. Holman?
Well, like I said the last time I did this, there is no eloquent way to present interpretation and indicators other than reading them as we go. I tried to provide them to you in a bit of a different format to help maybe demonstrate what monitoring would look like by having some of the potential evidence sources. That was also a way for me to think through, what data do we have available. There are also indicators of compliance listed here that we have 0 data for. But I think it's important to call out the indicators. One specifically is student goal setting. Like we have goal setting conferences for students at the elementary school, but I can't think of a universal way where we document student goals for our secondary students outside of the high school and beyond plan process-ish. And even that is a little bit, and so in our good fashion, we aspire with our policy, and even in our indicators and interpretation and indicators, we're aspiring because we know that those are practices that the policy language speaks to, and elements that we want to pay attention to. And so, Director Yoakum, I know you sent an email with some. I didn't actually modify anything other than the header. I think it was on 10.2 that wasn't bolded correctly. Thank you for that. But I didn't change anything, so please use those as talking points as we go through tonight, and we can have those conversations. Okay, so 10.1 in the category of relationship and belonging. I'm just going to read my interpretation rather than policy and interpretation. It states, I interpret this to mean that every student experiences a learning environment characterized by supportive relationships, inclusion, respect for identity, culturally responsive practices, and constructive approaches to resolving conflict. Positive relationships mean peer-to-peer relationships and student-to-adult relationships, which are grounded in trust, care, dignity, and respect. Belonging means students feel known, valued, included, and connected to their school community. Culturally responsive practices means instructional and relational practices that recognize value and respond to students' identities, lived experiences, cultures, and perspectives. Restorative approaches means practices that repair harm, restore relationships, develop and build accountability, and strengthen community relationships rather than relying primarily on punitive approaches. The indicators of compliance for 10.1, the educators establish positive relationships with students. Students experience a strong sense of belonging. Students experience culturally responsive learning environments, and schools use restorative and pro-social approaches to conflict resolution. One of the areas that Director Yoakum asked about was in the interpretation, and in the third paragraph it says belonging means students feel known. And it was about the word of feel. And if a student feels like they are known, valued, included, and connected, are they actually known, valued, included, and connected? And so I've thought about that, I think, since Sunday at 4:47 when you emailed. And I think maybe the question is, why did I use that term? And it's similar to how we're gaining our students' perceptions through Panorama. And if I have a perception, if I have a high sense of belonging, or if I state that I have, high self-efficacy through all of our, but what if your question is, well, what if they don't actually have high self-efficacy? And here it's the question of, is feeling the same as the actual being known, valued, and so I have toiled with that, and I think the perception surveys that we offer really is asking students, how do you feel and reflect on this, rather than them providing evidence of the actuality of that. And I don't know if that's accurate, but that's just, as I was thinking about how to quantify this, it's based on students' perceptions of that.
Director Yoakum?
So, thank you. Is the interpretation based off of what data we have available? Or is it based off of your interpretation of what the board's value is? And I say that because I'm thinking of my child, where he may feel like, I'm going to say my child, a child who may be excluded potentially for special education services. And they may feel belonging because they are invited in to an assembly. But are they actually belonging? Are they do they belong based off of the actions, because this is a policy that is the district ensuring learning environments create this. So I totally see what you're doing, and I feel like it is based off of, well, this data is available, so that's what I'm going to base my interpretation on versus the bigger value. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe it is just how students feel versus, it's a bigger question. Wasn't expecting necessarily. I mean, I don't know if that one word is really going to do anything, but I think the conversation here of more of what do you base interpretations on might be the bigger conversation. But thank you for
I would
thinking
say I
about it.
try and interpret based on the board's policy, not just on the evidence that's available, the data that's available. And so, so I took a note here, you know, what about actual value?
And I can also see where it says foster a strong sense of belonging, right? So it's what you, to me, that sense is more of what you feel. And then measuring actual belonging. But I also think it's different because if I do think of my son, I also know he's not participating in those panorama surveys, right? So what is his experience? So just personal more.
Yeah, thank you.
I did have a question, and I know you said around restorative practices, and I see one of the potential evidence sources being a restorative practices implementation report, which I'm assuming would be sort of probably similar to what we do in OE 1410 or something, where the board gets a separate narrative about restorative practice, which I think is a good idea. I'm curious whether we actually have any data sources around that, and I might be thinking about this way too simply, with too much simplicity of, you know, I know that we're, I believe, required by law to track exclusionary discipline, but I don't think there's any requirements around, you know, okay, this student has done something. Do we suspend them? Do we, you know, I don't know, have them do lunch duty or something like that? Or do we engage in a restorative conversation? This is really just more of a wondering question of how that works, and if we would even have data to be able to say, oh, we're engaging in more restorative conversations, or if I could also see it being a lot more informal than, you know, for example, exclusionary discipline, where there's a whole bunch of paperwork that has to come along with that.
So I took a note down, is there data in Skyward related to restorative processes? And I'll tell you what I believe, and then I'll actually have to go find out what reality is. I actually believe there's more indicators in Skyward that, you know, it isn't just exclusionary discipline. I think there's other indicators. And then my question is, how universally are those being used? And with what fidelity are those being used at our schools such that we could use those, you know, today for monitoring? Or is that something we would need to work towards as an organization? Because if, and I completely agree, because if exclusionary discipline is something that we've worked to reduce, there are responses to behavior that are still required. And so that's a great question. I'll make sure to get that answer.
Director Richter.
I actually had a very similar, that was the two I was asking about. So everything you both just said, and on the restorative practices implementation report, is that supposed to be an ongoing thing, or would it be just an implementation first 1 or 2 years only? Just curious about that.
Yeah, so I can answer that. So that is deeply connected to OE14 because we already have that as a process. And so it's either modifying that, connecting it to this, you know, maybe it's using the same report as evidence here as well, or maybe there's something else that would be beneficial. So we already have that as a process.
And still on that number 4, where it says professional learning, that feels like intent, not outcome. So my comment was what President Guthrie already said about, is there maybe something with some data? So.
Yeah. Thank you for that. The tension I always work with in OEs is these aren't technically outcome reports, and it's sometimes hard to measure the implementation of an operation without a data set. And so so yes, professional learning. So from a technical standpoint in monitoring, do we provide ongoing professional learning related to restorative practices is part of operational implementation. And while yes, sometimes that's a check yes or check no, it still is good information for the board to know. And so if there's more to it, we can talk about what that data need would be.
Director Meekhoff.
Something I'm thinking about as we're talking about data on restorative practices is that I can see where it would be difficult because so many of these, when I think about restorative practices, some definitely have a very planned, deliberate conversation, but so much of this is authentic, unplanned interactions between teachers, counselors, students that I also want to remain that way. And so finding a balance between having a process that we can, have the data on, and also like letting teachers do their jobs and do them well, or custodians when there's something in the lunchroom, or, but I really appreciate the call out around restorative practices over punitive. But I think sometimes punitive is the paperwork, right? Like we can track that more than some of the restorative work.
Thank you for calling that out. We have one of our associate principals in the audience tonight, and I can guarantee you, our administrators, it's a way of life to want to be restorative. And even as you're going through maybe a required exclusion, you can be restorative in those processes, in the language you use, in how you reinvite students back into an instructional setting. And so restorative, there's like big R restorative practices, and that's really what we report in OE 14. It's like a very distinct restorative process that really does highlight all elements of that. And then there's the day-to-day way we do business. And I think that is probably also where the professional learning comes in, because, for many, it may not be their default. And so continuing to grow and learn in our thinking and the ways that we interact. And it's not just with students. This is a student policy, but it's really how we want to interact with peers, with people we're leading. And so it's an approach to interacting with people that is also a response to behavior as well.
Director Yoakum.
I had one more, and I think I know the answer, but I just want to confirm. So how the policy explicitly names relationships, cultivating positive relationships among peers. And indicator 1 really focuses on educators. And I had asked, is there a dedicated indicator for peer-to-peer relationships, or really is that intended to live within that indicator 2 in the panorama data? But I think that was one that our students called out. Was that one? So just bringing that up a little bit.
So I will take that back to my team to have that conversation. The measurement of that could also, it could be an indicator that never has a measure. But it's a good question to ask. And, sense of belonging, so many of these they're not always directly connected to exactly what we're monitoring. And a sense of belonging, it's about the entire environment and experience. Peers are part of that, but not exactly. We have some new panorama elements. I'm trying to remember the exact policy that we drafted them in response to, but it's about peers advocating and or having the ability to have discussions related to disability. Was it OE 14? OE results 3. Thank you. Thank you. And so there may be survey items that get to the peer-to-peer relationship better than just sense of belonging, which is relatively broad.
Director Richter.
On this and the other OE 10 parts we're going to get to, could you just tell me what it means to say the Danielson framework?
Thank you so much. I just want to call out that Associate Superintendent Ortega and Dr. Krieger, our Director of Data Research and Accountability, spent about an hour and a half with me last week debating these indicators and interpretation, and I really appreciated that. And we had a pretty robust conversation around the Danielson framework being part of monitoring. And so our teacher's evaluation is based on the Charlotte Danielson instructional framework. The original Danielson framework was 4 domains. Then the state adopted 8 criteria that evaluation has to align with. And so the Danielson framework aligns with 8 criteria of essentially effective teaching. And when we kind of launched this conversation with the board related to OE10, we actually did it through the lens of the instructional framework, because it calls out so many of the different elements and values that the board speaks to in your policy. And so we have this trove of data that, like, you take number 1, educators establish positive relationships with students. There's a significant data set that answers that question related to our educators. Now, with every data set, there are considerations and grains of salt that need to be taken. That is a 4-tiered rubric. Educators are being rated as unsatisfactory, basic, proficient, and distinguished. The majority, and when I say majority, the significant majority of our educators that are evaluated on all 8 criteria and all 26, I believe, components live within proficient and distinguished. And so using that, it will be important for a couple of things. One, to understand what is the difference between proficient and distinguished, because there's actually a difference between those two. Another piece is about 40% of our educators in any given year are evaluated in the full spectrum of the evaluation components. Just kind of in outdated term, we have a long form and a short form. If you're beyond your 4th year of teaching, you can be on the short form, and you kind of select a component, you set goals. It's a very focused evaluation, and then you cycle on every 6 years to the comprehensive evaluation. And with that said, I still think it provides a look into a data set that actually aims to answer the same questions the board is through their policies. And so thank you for bringing that up, because it's a really important element. We don't use it in any other monitoring. And so, but understanding what the data is and is not, because you can also see for educators establish positive relations. Yeah, there it is. That there's also student panorama items. And what I'm not proposing is that there's a relationship, like a causal relationship between those. There will be a correlation. There's a relationship between them, but it's not a cause and effect. And so my assumption is that our students will report lower than the percent of teachers receiving proficient or distinguished. But it doesn't mean that it's an invalid data set. and it could cause for some good conversations on the operations side. So that's a long answer to your question, but it's partly because it would be a new element that we add to monitoring.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Director Yocum.
This was just a side thought I put in there, but I felt that everyone should hear this. And the number of times that student panorama items are listed, I think it's in every single indicator. And I was saying how I think it would be wonderful for our student board reps to find a way to connect with students about the importance of taking this survey seriously and how much it really does impact what we do and the conversations that we have. So just using this as an example, and I just want to say that out loud.
Yeah, I think there was one other thing that I just wanted to touch on. Sorry, going back to restorative practices. No, it's totally fine. That was a good conversation. But bringing forward the student feedback again, that sort of closing the loop. So it's not enough just to discipline students, but also ensuring that that all students affected by a particular action sort of are able to see in some way that they're that they were heard. So if a student complains, this student A is bullying me, it's not enough to just deal with student A, although that should be done, but also making sure that the student who reported that feels like they were actually heard. And restorative approaches are actually a way to do that. That's sort of built in, because you are involving the students who were harmed as well, and working through that. So the students, when we talked with them a few months ago, I remember them being really, really, just really felt that it was important for not just to handle, to address harms, but to really ensure that students know that those harms are being addressed. And so just another plug for restorative approaches as a way to do that. All right, are we ready to move on to 10.2? All right.
Maybe I will read the policy, because it felt a little bit arbitrary just reading the interpretation. So 10.2, culture of learning. The policy states ensure learning environments promote a culture of learning by teaching effective strategies, providing opportunities for students to take ownership of their work, encouraging perseverance in intellectual risk-taking, and providing consistent academic and social-emotional support so that students can thrive. Interpretation, I interpret this to mean that students are actively engaged in learning, develop ownership of their learning, persist through challenge, and receive the academic and social and emotional supports necessary to achieve success. Culture of learning means students understand the purpose of learning, are motivated to improve, participate in rigorous learning, and develop future-ready skills. Effective strategies means instructional practices that explicitly teach students how to learn, think critically, solve problems, monitor progress, collaborate, and reflect on learning. Ownership of learning means students set goals, monitor progress, seek support, reflect on performance, and demonstrate agency in the learning process. Perseverance in intellectual risk-taking means students engage in challenging work, persist when learning is difficult, and view mistakes as opportunities for growth. Academic and social-emotional support means coordinated systems, instructional practices, and interventions that help students access learning. And the six indicators of compliance: students actively engage in learning, students demonstrate ownership of learning, students demonstrate confidence and perseverance, students have access to rigorous learning, students receive academic and social-emotional support, and instructional practices foster a culture of learning.
Director Yocum.
Okay, my first question just feel like I'm reading my email to you, Dr. Holman. So it says indicator 3, students demonstrate confidence and perseverance. And I just wanted to know why academic growth in co-taught classes is listed as a measure for demonstrating confidence and perseverance. It kind of seems like the focus is specifically on students receiving ML or special education services rather than the whole student body. So I'm just curious why that fits there.
Yeah, and I was thinking about courses where we know students are participating and that there are supports in place because of, I guess, unique challenges maybe with the content or whatever. And co-taught courses are designed so that students are able to achieve the level of rigor with the general standards. And so the majority of the student body doesn't participate in co-taught courses. The majority of the student body participates in, I'll just say, the regular profile of classes. And so the participating in a co-taught class generally means there's been a history of difficulty or struggle, and you're already entering into an environment where maybe you've had past failure. And so that was kind of my thinking around that, and I understand where you're coming from.
I guess, okay, so looking at the student profile, right? And we look at all those elements. I can see where maybe you're speaking to this about academic, but if we're looking more at this whole child, I can tell you my child who will probably be in a co-taught class will have all the confidence and perseverance that he needs, and my one in Gen Ed or in AP will probably really struggle with that. So it's sort of making this assumption that that's who we really need to focus on, where maybe it's more hidden. It's not called out in an IEP or a 504 or so. Anyway, just something to think about, that it kind of feels like we're already saying, you here in this co-taught class, you lack confidence and perseverance more so than your peers over here. That's just kind of how it reads to me by seeing it there. Okay, I know you hear me.
Yeah. You had a question about indicator 4 as well, if I remember correctly.
Yes, I was going to let somebody else go first.
You might as well just jump in.
Sorry, you guys took AI, I took OE10. So what did I say? I said, 4 is kind of along the same lines, students having access to rigorous learning. So we include here dual credit participation and highly capable participation. And I said something just wasn't sitting right with me, that this policy really focuses on all students benefiting from teaching strategies that encourage risk-taking and ownership, but measuring participation in specialized programs that not every student accesses feels kind of mismatched. And I just wanted to know how more of dual credit or highly capable, how that evidence ties into this broader picture of this specific sub-policy.
Yeah, and I guess and remember, these are the potential evidence sources, and yeah, I know. So why did I select it? So rigorous learning is not, there's not one definition for all of our students. And another, I guess, lens would be, the hope is that every course a student is providing rigorous learning. And for some of our learners, they have determined that dual credit courses are right for them. And so they're kind of selecting into a level of rigor that isn't technically required of all students. That is possibly the same for highly capable programs at younger ages. It's probably some parent choice as well. At older grades, there is some student agency and choice in that as well. And so those are a couple of places where it's a selection into an academic pathway because of, for that student, it's the right level of rigor. And then, so that's what I was thinking about those.
So I'm still looking at this policy, and it's ensuring that the system creates an environment that promotes a culture of learning. And is it more of like, yes, we do, because this district offers these options for students to self-select into, rather than the system creating the environment for all students? I don't know, something feels odd to me with that.
Yeah. And I would say the first bullet point there is student panorama, which is all students, and the teacher evaluation data is all students.
So this would just be measuring how many students are participating in dual credit, and how many students are participating in highly capable, as a way to measure that our learning environments are promoting a culture of learning at the rigor that it is providing. Where am I? I'm trying to find the line in it. I'm even trying to figure where.
Yeah, and it's based on the indicator of students have access to rigorous learning, and so maybe it's the indicator that we should discuss.
Because access, where else do we measure that? Students, I mean, there's R1, and then there's OE14. So we have the access rather than, this almost feels like the next step, like, and within that is this environment. They don't pay me to come up with that stuff. That's your job.
And one thing I would note, because especially highly capable was not sitting right with me either. And in OE14, we were very precise. I remember conversations about this there is, so 14.4 is provide students with equitable access to rigorous academic coursework or programs. And we're measuring things a little bit differently here, but that's like 8th grade algebra, that's dual credit. But we put the highly capable, looking at highly capable participation in 14.5, ensure that student access to educational programs is equitable in policy and practice, explicitly seeing it as an educational program and not as rigorous coursework. And so that's, I think, seeing it back with rigorous coursework is where it didn't feel aligned with the conversations that we'd had previously. For me, it's really just that one, less dual credit. I don't know why. I'm not going to try to put that into words, but yeah, that is just maybe something to look at.
So the note I jotted down is indicator for even accurately measuring the policy. So I think that's where I'm landing. That's the question that needs to be answered. Yep, thank you. That's why we do this.
Director Richter.
I was curious about, in the original policy, it mentions teaching effective strategies. In the interpretation, you have it laid out what effective strategies mean. And unless I'm blind, there's nothing in the indicators about it. And so I'm curious.
So I think indicator 2 gets as close to connecting to that. Students demonstrate ownership of learning. And we have panorama items related to self-management. But there's not a direct measure of that in this at this point.
It made me think, I guess it didn't explicitly come up in the study session before this, but some of that conversation about when to use a tool, how to use a tool, it felt like that same thing, so maybe it's something we can add at a later time. I just wanted to ask. I have a couple more, but if other people have something, I'll wait.
Go for it.
Oh, this may be nitpicky, I apologize. in culture of learning, in the interpretation, understand the purpose of learning, are motivated to improve, participate in rigorous learning. And then it says develop future-ready skills. And part of me says, well, I wouldn't list, develop math skills or social studies skills here. I could also see an argument for. So I was just kind of a little questioning.
As to why I included it, to me, that's a very encompassing comment about everything we do is actually directed at something. And so a culture of learning with directionality, for me, is what made sense.
And my last one is in perseverance and intellectual risk-taking. Means students engage in challenging work, persist when learning is difficult, view mistakes as opportunities for growth. And I am reminded of, I think it was a first grade teacher who used to say to us, you need the right amount of challenge. Not too easy, you get bored. Not too hard, you stop being able to process. And so that made me think a little bit of some of the 8th grade algebra conversations we've had and questions we've had around that. I'm not actually advocating for any change here. I'm just kind of bringing that up because that's something I thought about while reading it. Engage in challenging work, but the right amount, persist when it's difficult, but not too, there's a balance. And I don't know if that sparks anything or not. I'm just saying it as a comment.
Director Meekhoff.
So I've just been sitting back, taking this all in, and I really can appreciate and understand all perspectives around, the different evidence sources. And I'm kind of wondering if, indicator 4 can be folded into number 1 a little bit with some language change. Not necessarily like have access to rigorous learning, but if we're talking about students actively engaging in challenging work, in work, and then maybe removing the highly capable participation. I agree with Director Guthrie around the dual credit participation. I do see value there in terms of talking about access to rigorous learning. But yeah, I just had to wonder if maybe that could somehow, once again, not my job, but it seems like there was potential there.
I do see them as two different things. I can have a student who's taking an AP class and is phoning it in. And that would be access to rigorous coursework, engaging in rigorous coursework, but not necessarily actively engaging in learning. Yeah, and I realized why dual credit is sitting differently from me from highly capable. It's that it's the student agency component. Any student in theory can enroll in a dual credit class, or we should not be gatekeeping that. We shouldn't be as a system. Highly capable is different because you can have a student who's interested or who would enjoy participating in that, but there is, we do gatekeep that for lack of a better term, or it's not just a stick up your hand and say, this is what I want to engage in. Any other comments? Or ready to move on to 10.3?
It's interesting when I go through this process and I'm working to create unique interpretations for each sub-policy. 10.3, 10.5, and 10.6. There is so much overlap with those policies that there may come a point in time where I come to the board and say, we may want to do some policy work. But I'm not bringing that tonight because that's not where we're at. We will do interpretation and indicators for all, 8 or 9 subcomponents to OE10. 10.3, why don't we do this? There we go. Purposeful and equitable conditions for learning. Policy states ensure learning environments are intentionally designed and structured to use instructional time, practices, and supports purposefully and equitably in order to support high levels of student engagement and learning. I interpret this to mean that resources, instructional time, staffing, interventions, and learning opportunities are intentionally organized to support student success. Purposeful means decisions are based on student need, evidence, strategic priorities, and intended learning outcomes. Equitable means resources and opportunities are provided in ways that respond to student need and reduce barriers to participation and success. Conditions for learning means the schedules, staffing, programs, instructional supports, and school structures that make learning possible. 3 indicators. Students have equitable access to district programs and services. Resources and supports are allocated based on student need. Instructional time is protected and used purposefully. This is one of those, even as I wrote those indicators, it just felt like there's a gap between where we want to be and where we are. And, you know, when I think about indicator 2, resources and supports are allocated based on student need, there is evidence that we do that, and there's evidence that there's growth. And so it's just, it was interesting going through the process and kind of realizing that, you know, this is one where there's probably a pretty big delta between where we are and where we want to be. And the prototypical model doesn't help. And, you know, I
would also think of student need as going beyond what's listed here. Maybe this is where the highly capable participation indicator actually goes, indicator, evidence source. Because student needs are not just the things that we identify in schools, such as multilingual services, in board results that we look at, or board data, things like low-income status is not here. Well, I guess it's sort of in Title I, but we have many students across our system who are low income and are not at Title I schools. So, but then there's also student needs for highly capable students. There's student needs for students who are super passionate about art and need opportunities to stretch themselves in that way. So that I guess I'm not opposed to what's here. Just clarifying that student need is correct, or this is the right indicator. And I would encourage thinking broadly about the data sources that we could use there. And one other thing I'll throw in too, the students, when we met with them, were very pointed on the purposeful use of time, I think it is, being from a staff perspective and also from a student perspective. And I can appreciate the challenges with that. I just wanted to call out that the evidence sources here right now are more staff focused or gathering data from staff. And I just wanted to bring forward that feedback because that was one of the things that they really pushed on. Anything else on 10.3?
I should jot a note that to see if we have evidence or data related to the student perspective.
$10.3. Anything else? Can move on to 10.4.
Okay, 10.4 is systems to address harm and promote pro-social behavior. Policy states ensure learning environments include clearly established systems and practices to prevent, address, and repair harm resulting from behaviors including bullying, harassment, discrimination, and microaggressions, and that these environments foster understanding, respect, positive peer-to-peer relationships, and the development of pro-social student behavior. I interpret this to mean that schools create environments where positive behavior is explicitly taught, reinforced, and supported, while systems effectively address conduct that causes harm. Pro-social behavior means actions that contribute positively to the school community, including empathy, responsibility, kindness, respect, and accountability. Harm means conduct that negatively affects another individual or group. Addressing harm means the district has systems to report, investigate, respond, support affected students, and restore relationships when appropriate. 5 indicators of compliance. First, student behavior data demonstrates safe and respectful learning environments. Discipline practices are monitored for disproportionality. Students perceive adults as accessible and fair when conflict or harm occurs. Schools teach and reinforce positive behavior. And finally, reports of harassment, intimidation, bullying, discrimination, and related concerns are addressed.
Director Meekoff?
I'm kind of circling back to my prior comment in terms of the restorative conversations. I feel like, especially in number 5, I think what I think about in the indicator 5, it feels like some of the most challenging and open to interpretation in terms of the data, when it's outside of like an actual HIB or discrimination, which so much of it is in this like gray area. So I'm just kind of thinking aloud in terms of like a kind of post-incident survey, once again, paperwork, like how do we determine how students feel about that and how that went in terms of the harm that was caused. So I'm essentially just repeating myself on the restorative practices, but it seems very clear that, a formal report, a Title IX discrimination complaint, obviously we have those systems in place, but most of what's happening is not those.
Director Yoakum?
Another one that I had emailed. So does the sub-policy offer, or I guess the indicators, does this offer an opportunity to measure more consistent district-wide behavioral systems and expectations? Like, for example, in indicator 1, an office referral for, and we've heard this before, for wearing a hoodie at one school might look very different from the culture at another school. So using office referrals as an indicator of compliance almost feels secondary, only after work that has kind of been done to kind of create this more consistent, equitable systems established across all buildings. So I mentioned like the handbook, like is there something that's more consistent, because I worry that like if there's an office referral as an indicator, as evidence, that's going to look very different if we do not have consistent systems in place at all schools or across all schools.
Director Richter?
I find myself with a really general question about all of the OE 10 indicators, actually, because we've listed student panorama data, and I suddenly realize I didn't ask, is that based on the existing questions we ask? Would there be an opportunity to add, because if I'm understanding, they have sort of other options that we could put on the survey?
So
would there be anything applicable to some of these items that don't have it right now?
Yeah. I have a third column that you can't see that extrapolates the Danielson into like 2A and 4D, it kind of gets into the details. And that's the same with the student panorama items as well. Like, I believe most of these have alignment with current panorama survey items. We can add, and there's 2 different ways to add. There's choosing from the bank of panorama survey items that they have developed, which have gone through all of the appropriate testing to be valid, reliable, comparative, and then there's times where we write our own. and those are not valid, reliable, comparative, and we're hoping that they're measuring what we think they are. And so we have done both. And so if we get into here and we find there's a student element that we need, we would go through the process to figure out which pathway we choose. And then I would share with the board the outcome of that, because to me it's two very different data sets.
One other piece of student feedback that I wanted to reinforce on 10.4 with the interpretation, they talked a lot about these practices in the policy really being the responsibility of all the humans in the system. So everybody from the board of directors down to the individuals who are in the classroom day to day. And the interpretation still feels very, it doesn't have that individual responsibility component. It's still talking about schools and systems in the district. And I understand that that schools are made up of humans, and that is eventually where it will fall. But that might just be something to think about, whether there are ways to really strengthen that individual responsibility of each of us within these schools, the district, the systems. Anything else on 10.4? I think we can go to 10.5.
Okay. Okay, 10.5, learning environments. Ensure learning environments are intentionally designed, structured, and maintained to support student engagement and effective learning, and to provide equitable and accessible learning environments. So I interpret this to mean that school-sponsored environments are safe, accessible, functional, and conducive to learning. Learning environments means classrooms, common spaces, instructional settings, digital learning systems, and school-sponsored extracurricular experiences. Accessible means students can participate in learning without unnecessary physical, instructional, language, disability-related, or programmatic barriers. Maintained means spaces are safe, clean, functional, and responsive to identified needs. 4 indicators of compliance. First, facilities are safe, functional, and maintained. Learning spaces support accessibility and participation. Number 3, students and families report learning environments that support safety and participation. And 4th, classroom environments support learning.
Director Yoakum?
One of my other comments was the interpretation of learning environments. It makes sense to me through physical and digital spaces, but wanting to know kind of more elaborating on the school-sponsored extracurricular experiences. It kind of shifts that definition from the environment in the space to the experience within it. And so is this more of a, I know you said they kind of all blend together, but is this more of the space, or is it like what, I guess, can you just explain that a little bit more? Because I feel like it's very different than the location.
I can.
Okay.
And so at least I'll tell you my thinking, and you may say, no, that's not a good interpretation of our policy, and I'll rewrite it. When we were discussing environments, we talked about school environments occur in different places. They occur on the bus. School experiences occur for a school-sponsored drama event at maybe a different high school. The jazz band may go to a competition and it's school-sponsored, and so just trying to think of the environments that our kids are in, of which we have control, responsibility, that all of those are learning environments, and we want our coaches and our chaperones, we want everyone to think of the environment that they're in charge of, if you will, to be supportive of the type of learning environment that we want for kids. I think of, the basketball coach, not that ours have done this, I'm just, screaming at their players, cursing at their players. Like, those are not environments that any of us would deem as appropriate or the type of environment we want for our students. So that's why I expanded it beyond, because if we think about where do our students learn, well, they certainly learn from those extracurricular activities and events and experiences. And so I broadened it beyond the scope of our schools, but with that parameter of school sponsored, because I think you brought up like after school, like PTSA after school programs. This does not cover that.
I think it's more, so it's almost like we're looking at the experience where the example you gave right there of a coach yelling. So we're looking at that in this policy, but it's not applied in like a classroom setting because it's just the setting. So there's like a difference between the location and then actually like the human behavior. So it almost feels like, are we measuring experiences across the common spaces and instructional settings, or just in extracurricular experiences? Does that make sense? Like, so yeah, I understand why it's there, and I think it's good it's there, but it almost just highlights we're only looking at your experience in extracurricular activities, not anywhere else. Yeah. So maybe it's just the word experiences, or if that's what we're really trying to look at, is how is it environment? Yeah, I'm just giving you more to think about.
I wish I could ask you to repeat everything you just said, because
it is recorded.
Because so do you feel like the interpretation is too broad or too narrow? Because I tried to write it broad to capture the lunchroom and the hallways, and not that we can collect data on every last environment, but yes, I tried to write my interpretation to be broad enough that all of the environments that our kids are in are captured.
And I think it's more environment as a location, whether it's digital, whether it's a hallway, but then the example you gave of the extracurricular experience is a coach yelling at a child. Yeah. So it's not a location, it is actually a behavior of an adult, where I don't think that that's what this policy is measuring, right? It is more of, so is it more of that extracurricular spaces or is it more of the location, like on the bus, or are we really looking at how the bus driver is engaging with students? Because I don't think that's supposed to be this sub-policy. Is that correct?
Yep.
Does that make sense? Okay.
I circled the word experiences and put a question mark.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else? 10.5? On to 10.6.
.6, access to facilities. Ensure students have equitable and inclusive access to district facilities, learning spaces, and essential school environments so that all students can fully participate in learning, including access to classrooms, ingress and egress, restrooms, common areas, and other spaces necessary for the school day. I interpret this to mean that students can access school facilities and program spaces necessary to participate fully in the educational program. Equitable access means students can use classrooms, restrooms, common spaces, specialized program areas, and activity spaces without unnecessary barriers. Inclusive access means facilities support participation by students with different physical, sensory, cognitive, developmental, language, and programmatic needs. 4 indicators of compliance. Facilities are reviewed for access barriers. Students with facility-related accommodations receive required access. External findings related to facility access are monitored, and capital planning addresses identified access needs.
Director Meekoff?
I'm wondering if in the potential evidence sources here, if we could somehow include like students and families like that experience, because maybe if they don't feel like it's, I love that I'm trying to scroll on this screen. Whoops. Not in charge of that. Thank you. Yeah, because even if maybe we feel like it's accessible, that they can access school facilities and program spaces, but it's quite possible that students don't feel like they can. Or there are significant barriers in accessing it.
Yeah, one of the things that students called out too was that follow-up when they submit a request, if they do get to that point. To Director Meekoff's point, they may not even know where to go, but having that follow-up, this thinking whether there are some evidence sources that could be about that experience, making sure that whatever we're doing really does work. Like if we put in a wheelchair ramp somewhere, for example, but it's not in a visible place, or people don't realize it's there, or they think that they have to, go around some different way, that I think would not be our expectations that we're putting out here. And so thinking about whether there's a way to include that as evidence, or just call it out as something that we expect, even if we can't measure it, because it's a hard thing to measure. How do you measure what you don't even know? All done with 10.6, on to 10.7.
But 6 and 7 actually do relate to one another. Sorry, it's after 9 o'clock. All right, 10.7 is about safety systems. Ensure learning environments are supported by comprehensive safety systems that promote physical and emotional safety and include coordinated practices for prevention, early identification and intervention, threat assessment, crisis response, and recovery, so that students and staff are secure and supported in the learning environment. I interpret this to mean that the district maintains coordinated systems that support physical safety, emotional safety, emergency preparedness, threat assessment, response, and recovery. Comprehensive safety systems mean prevention, preparedness, intervention, response, recovery, training, drills, and communication. Physical safety means students are protected from reasonably foreseeable threats to bodily safety. Emotional safety means students can learn without intimidation, harassment, fear, or threats that interfere with access to learning. 4 indicators of compliance. First, schools maintain required emergency preparedness systems. Threat assessment and crisis response systems are implemented. Students and families report feeling safe at school. Safety audits and corrective actions are completed.
All good? Any comments, questions? Director Richter.
On the first indicator with required emergency preparedness systems, this is a minor thing, and it's because of my PTSA involvement over the years. There's a PTSA, there's a whole section of our PTSAs that's dedicated to emergency preparedness. Works with the school, but is not totally controlled by the school in any means. So I was actually rather glad to see that wasn't listed. And those two things are separate, but at the same time, I know it's there. It might overlap with this. So I think I'm just throwing that out. If it's interesting or helpful, I don't think I have a question.
Yeah.
I do have a question about something else, though, but okay. My actual question was one I sent to Dr. Holman earlier, which kind of ties to the fact that when I look at the potential evidence sources, and I understand why this is, but they are very much about having plans or records of trainings, we have protocols, but there's not a lot of, I didn't see anything here, please correct me if I'm wrong, that is about actual accidents or incidents or things that might cause these protocols to be triggered. And so I was curious if there's any way to include that and or reason to include that, because I don't know the whole landscape here.
I'll follow up with my team. We, anytime there's, I'll just say, a big crisis event, there's a team that does an after-action report, and that's a formal process. It's written, and so there might be an element of, like, you know, those reportings that could be shared in some format.
And my intent would not be to accidentally ding the school system on the fact that something unexpected happened. I'm just thinking of it more as almost more of a continuous improvement learning example, like, was it last year, with the changes to what trespassing meant, you know, and access to our schools. You know, there was something that was unpredictable, something happened, but then there was an action taken and more safety because of it. I don't know. It seems like a nice way to actually show the district being responsive to emerging trends or hazards.
Yeah.
So,
No, after actions are, like, they also highlight the positives. And they identify gaps in our system and process. And to me, that's exactly what this policy is calling out is, do you have systems in place? The only way to have a system in place is to always continue to grow it. So, yeah, I'll talk with Deputy Superintendent Gillingham about, like, some form of narrative that could be added, because we have that information, like exactly what you're asking about. So,
and I don't know that I am honestly advocating for a long narrative in there, but just throwing out the thought, if it's something that works to demonstrate.
Well, it's similar to what we do with restorative practices. You know, the board receives a narrative related to that. It's maybe half a page to a page, enough to describe and kind of articulate the process and highlight what occurred. You know, an after-action review is 15, 18 pages, 20 pages long at times. So I wouldn't do that to you.
All right, 10.8.
Assessment and grading practices. Ensure assessment and grading practices are intentionally designed and implemented to support student learning by incorporating multiple measures of learning, providing regular and timely feedback that supports improvement, and applying equitable and consistent approaches to evaluating student learning and determining grades. I interpret this to mean that assessment and grading practices provide accurate, fair, meaningful, and timely information about student learning and progress. Assessment means the collection of evidence used to understand student progress toward learning targets and standards. Grading means the reporting of student achievement and progress in ways that are understandable, consistent, and aligned with learning expectations. Timely feedback means information students can use while there is still an opportunity to improve learning and achievement. Consistent means grading expectations are not dependent solely on the classroom, school, or teacher assignment. 3 indicators of compliance. First, district grading expectations are implemented consistently. Students and families have access to current academic progress information, and assessment practices support learning and improvement.
Director Meekhoff.
I really appreciate the note on just timely feedback. I think that's something that I consistently hear from students and caregivers and have experienced myself as a parent. And I also appreciate the language around grading systems being implemented consistently, as we've talked about, as well as having access to academic progress. I think it can be really tricky with the different programs. If some teachers are tracking on Canvas versus Skyward, and if maybe English is not your primary language, or you're not very tech savvy, or you don't have a ton of time, like trying to track your kids' progress in different apps, I think is really challenging. So I appreciate you calling that out.
Director Richter.
On the first indicator about district grading expectations are implemented consistently. If I'm remembering the students' feedback, they were thinking more about the syllabus being applied consistently, or what was going on in the single classroom with them. Talking to parents out in the community, I do wonder if there's also an additional aspect that is, because parents can see, well, my first kid had this teacher, and my second kid had that teacher, and my third kid had this teacher, and things have been graded differently, or AP classes, I'm sorry, but, families are very concerned about whether their kid gets that 3 or 4, the result and the A or the B or the C in the class that their peer at a different high school is going to get. And so I'm getting somewhere with this, I promise. In the first one, there's student panorama items, but I was actually wondering if there's a family panorama item, maybe? I don't know.
Great, thank you.
Director Yoakum.
I have no questions, but just a comment that I'm very excited for our first monitoring of OE10, and I'm especially very excited for this sub-policy. And I know that there's a lot of work that has gone into this, and I think this is one of potentially those aspirational sub-policies within this policy, and there are many of them, but I'm just really thankful that we're creating policy and you're interpreting and creating indicators that are pushing forward in thinking rather than just compliance based. But yeah, I really appreciate it, and I just want to highlight that, especially around this one. So I'm looking forward to seeing what this looks like.
Yeah.
Anything else on 10.8? If not, we're not taking action on this policy this evening. It's going to come back at our next meeting on August 17th for second reading and adoption. Yes.
So I think this is what I'll do. I will take all of the feedback I received this evening, and I will provide you with a strike-through underline version of what changed, what was deleted, modified, added, ahead of time, so that you have that. I will come and present the changes at the next meeting, and you can choose to take action or send me back to continue interpreting. Either way, it's up to you.
The next item on the agenda is the superintendent report. Dr. Holman.
I feel like I've spoken a lot this evening. So last year we adopted our strategic framework and came with 4 commitments, and What it didn't do was identify specific bodies of work. It really was, the concept behind the framework was that we were providing kind of aspiration and targets for the district, for our leaders, our staff to align with, commitments to our community. The title of it is Extraordinary Futures Start Today, Exceptional Experiences for Each Learner. So it was really about, like, how do we try and paint a picture about, like, who we believe we are and kind of where we're going. And there are bodies of work that truly are kind of foundational to what we're doing. And so wanted to provide this. I'm going to share this with our leaders on Thursday. This will be a public-facing document. And what it really does is it just coalesces around some very major initiatives that are aligned with our commitments and the direction that we're headed for kids. And so you can see there in that first column, 4 strategic objectives. First is implement elementary literacy instructional resources. And we talked about the language that we're using in this document. And I attempted practical language, because when a parent or a community member sees this, I want them to understand what we're saying. And so we just went through 5 years to adopt a new elementary literacy instructional resources, not curriculum. And so, spending the time and energy to implement that well, that is a large body of work that is all of our elementary leaders, all of our elementary teachers, our support staff. I mean, it's a big effort. You can see strategic objective 2 is implement secondary math instructional resources. Again, a large body of work that affects a broad set of stakeholders. The third there, and I had to play around with the words there because this one isn't as descriptive. And it comes from, we are required to start qualifying students for SLD, severe learning disability, using an RTI model, so response to intervention model, right? And so it's no longer the testing discrepancy model. Well, that means that we have to have instructional systems that are solid and in place, that our teachers understand the data and interventions that need to be in place and documented, such that they can work with our school teams and our school psychologists to go through that qualification process. These are best practices that really, when we think about our overall system, should be in place. And so the work of ensuring that we strengthen our instructional systems and also align it with our legal requirements, yes, it's meeting legal requirements, and it's good that we'll be able to qualify students through this process. It's also just good for kids to have their teachers paying attention to this degree, and that we have a system that's responding to student challenges. And then you can see there our 4th strategic objectives is align resources to strategic priorities. You can see all the way over on the far right how progress will be measured, budget and staffing aligned to priorities, facility usage aligned to enrollment and program needs, things like a boundary process, and then clear prioritization of major initiatives. And so the hope was to be kind of clear about what are the large bodies of work that our organization is taking on this year, communicate with internal and external stakeholders, and to provide a degree of transparency into our strategic framework. And underneath that, there's a body of work that aligns with our commitments to our community and our students. So we'll share this on Thursday with our leaders, and then we'll share this with our other stakeholders over the next month.
Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is school visits and community affairs. This portion of the business meeting of the board is an opportunity for any board members to inform and provide updates from school visits or from organizations or groups they engage with on behalf of LWSD. Are there any updates from the board? I know it's been July. June is nonstop, and then all of a sudden it stops. All right, the next item on the agenda are board member committee updates. Any updates there? Director Richter.
There we are. So I have a pseudo update, I think I'd say, on the Facility Advisory Committee. It happened on July 21st? Yes, that sounds right. During I think our last June board meeting, there was some direction or request given that the Facility Advisory Committee should meet and talk about the district's properties, including our vacant properties, land, more, not so much our existing schools. Now, I don't actually want to steal Associate Superintendent Posthumous's thunder by giving like a full, spilling all the tea on what was discussed, but I will also, that is partly because the Facility Advisory Committee will be meeting again, I think it's next week, don't quote me on that. There's 1 to 2 more sessions that will be done to continue the discussion and finish it off and kind of have a nice product. And I would expect that would come to the board at a further date. So again, I don't want to preemptively get in there. However, I would say that there was a robust and respectful discussion between our district reps there and the community members on that advisory committee. They kind of touched on the vacant district land that the district currently holds, kind of thinking about long-term planning, what's inside the urban growth boundary, what's outside the urban growth boundary, and giving recommendations from the committee based on the knowledge that is currently known to those committee members. After the other meetings, I'm happy to recap more, or like I said, I'm guessing that Associate Superintendent Posthumus will be back and give some information. So that is my committee update.
Thank you. If there's no other updates, the board plans to meet next on August 17th, 2026, with a 5 p.m. study session and a 7 p.m. board meeting. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn the August 3rd, 2026 board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director Richter and seconded by Director Yoakum that we adjourn. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye. Aye. All those opposed, hearing none, motion carries. The meeting is adjourned at 9:26 p.m.